Well, I can thank Kathleen from Nipper Courage for the inspiration behind this one.
Okay.
But yeah, so I'll monitor the questions and stuff that come through on Facebook and that sort of thing, so you don't need to worry about that.
Great.
I'll just grab the bottles. All righty. I don't know where Peter's gone. There he is.
Yeah, I was about to switch over to the computer because the power came back on to give it. No, this will do.
And g'day everyone joining us here in the Zoom chat on Facebook and at whiskyfair.com.au/forum to essentially what we're getting into the bonus section of Whisky Forum in 2020, our Whisky Fair replacement, because in the normal year, we would have packed up yesterday after the fair, gone to the pub, and we'll all be sleeping off last night's successes on the Sunday after Whisky Fair. But because we're doing this virtually this year, we can roll through and continue on. And it's my great pleasure to welcome 3 distillers from various parts of Australia who have been big supporters of Whisky Fair over the year, to Peter Bignell in Belgrove in Tassie, to Brian Hollingworth from Blackgate out in the mighty central west of New South Wales, and to Bill Mchenry down at the very, very south of Tasmania. Guys, how are we doing?
Oh, we're just holding on here, Scott. We're nearly being blown away by those roaring 40s.
Yeah. For those who for those who weren't in the Zoom chat, Peter's power has just come on about 2 minutes before going live here. A bit of a thing with distillers losing power for Whisky Forum this year, but we can see you got nice lights.
Yeah, that's great. And the volume's working now, is it?
Yep. Yeah. No, looks good.
Good.
Want to say good day to some people jumping on to Gary from down in Tasmania. So let's hope it's not too windy. I think Gary in Tasmania knows just how windy it is at the moment. To Kathleen Davies from Nipper Courage and Garth.
Hi, Kathleen.
Garth says, might go grab a dram and settle in for the afternoon. I think that's a smart move. So tonight, also today, we've got obviously 3 distillers. We're going to talk through where everyone's at and what you've been up to, but also for those lucky enough to grab a set. We're called Rarest Head and Speech for a reason, because we have sent out to some people who managed to snap them up 3 samples of some very rare whiskies released from these distilleries a little while ago. And thank you again to the team at Nipper Courage for putting these packs together. Looks very, very professional. So you obviously know that we had some professionals helping us out, because if I was putting them together, they wouldn't have looked as good. But these whiskies, the ones we're going to talk about today, as the very first single malt release from Mchenry. So the first release onto the market, Belgrove's first batch of the oat whiskey, and then Blackgate's 520. So each of these whiskies have a little bit of a story behind them or relevance, and we're sort of going to just have a conversation about that. But I just want to throw it out there first and foremost. Thanks for taking time out of your busy Sunday, and how are we all holding up in isolation and that sort of stuff, and whatever else we've been doing.
Yeah, well, isolation down here in Tasmania is, well, day to day, you hardly know anything's happening. Just not getting the tours at the distillery. That's the biggest difference I know. Went to Hobart last night, went out to dinner. The pub had the tables spread out a little bit further than usual, but other than that, you really wouldn't have known there was any difference. Fortunately, people are social distancing as far as best they can, and so almost back to normal, but no tourists. It's an issue if you're in the tourism industry. Yeah.
I mean, Bill, you've got one of the most picturesque distillery sites in Australia, right on the side of Mount Arthur there. Port Arthur, obviously, it's a big tourist location. I mean, do you get much cellar door traffic, and is that up or down at the moment?
Yeah, look, Peter's right. We things feel like they're normal. You know, we've got Tasmanians travelling around, which is fabulous, and they're all making an effort to get around and support businesses. So we're lucky, I think, in Australia, not just Tasmania, that you've got locals supporting locals. We do see that, you know, the total volume is suppressed, both by visitation and also our sales. And because we're also an exporter, Scott, you know, some of our export markets have been sort of, you know, significantly hit: Japan, Italy, Germany. So we felt a real sort of, you know, a sort of a depression in sales. But the silver lining for us is it's allowed us, JobKeeper has allowed us to actually invest in our staff and at the distillery. So we've just put in 2 brand new high-end cabins. Hope you can see that okay.
Yeah.
So you can come and stay here now. We built a new brewery. We built new bond stores. So we sort of use this time, you know, really practically to try and improve, you know, both the quality experience, but also just the efficiency of the business.
Yeah, excellent. And Brian, you don't have a cellar door open as such, but you know, a lot of people will come and visit and either camp on site or stay at the pub with you. Has that sort of picked up a little bit in the last little while?
Yeah, we've noticed a bit of an increase lately. When the pandemic first hit, our sales and visits just stopped dead. But then as people became more used to the idea, sales went up again, and visitation is it's increasing all the time. People, especially at the end of isolation, when people want to get out of Sydney, but it's a good place to come out and visit, I guess. But yeah, certainly increased lately.
Yeah, excellent. And we were just talking off air there as well, a bit of rain in the region as well, which it almost feels like, you know, the droughts before fires, before the pandemic. It's the forgotten of the you know, the apocalypse at the moment. But there's a bit of rain out there helping people along a bit.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. We've got a lot of rain. The country's looking really good. All the farmers are happy.
Yeah, excellent. Well, yeah, happy farmers means happy city boys.
Yeah, same down here in Tasmania. We've had a beautiful winter rains, best for years and years, and it started nice and early in the autumn. And the country looks magnificent here at the moment.
Yeah, awesome. Well, and that's great to hear, Peter. But they won't let me into Tasmania at the moment, so I'm going to have to take your word for it.
You can't come and look.
Yeah,
that's just Brian. Brian was saying, and Bill was saying about sales and export. Yeah, I had quite a big contract to China that all signed up, and March was my first order was supposed to go out. I had a big vat already vatted up, ready to bottle. Then all of a sudden that hit, and that contract's disappeared. She's gone. Even bought a new, part of a new still, and still trying to finish it off. It's all going to be finished by Christmas time, but no, that bit's all stopped, and we're just going back to local sales, and which are just starting to pick up a little bit now. But you know, all the stuff that went into bars and clubs, etc., yeah, that just totally stopped.
Yeah, it's been a year. That's for sure. I might pour myself a whiskey because it's about that time for me. And I'm going to kick off with the Mchenry Distillery, the first release, which was released in 2016. Initially, I've got the bottle here. So I think there was, hold on, I've got the information here. There was 100 bottles of this ever released. Far less than 100 made it to the mainland. A lot was sold, directly. And but I'm going to crack this, and we can talk about this. But one of the things that I always think about when I talk about Mchenry Distillery or have discussions about it is when everyone talks about Australian whiskey and our climate, we go, okay, it's almost 1 to 5 sometimes compared to Scottish aging and that sort of thing, except for the one spot on the Port Arthur Hill that Bill, you found that has very, very similar Scottish aging. And I think you're going to have a cracking, 10-year-old whiskey down the track. But this one's a 5-year-old. And I guess, to kick things off first, I mean, how are things going, and how's the whiskey looking like? Obviously, you're doing a lot with gin, but how's the whiskey looking?
Yeah, so look, I think, our whiskey is improving from barrel to barrel. I think it's natural. Any distillery that starts up, their first barrels, they're going to be a little bit hit and miss. As the distillers learning their craft, we were learning our craft 10 years ago. We don't release whiskey unless we're happy with it, but I've noticed of late, each release we're doing, it just seems to get better and better. And you mentioned, Scott, that the terroir at the distillery is really unique compared to most other distilleries, even in Tasmania. So the average rainfall we have here is 1,200 millimetres a year. It's, in the old scale, it's about 48 inches a year. I exchanged a few emails with a guy that reacted to some of the things I'd said on a program that was recently on Channel 2, and I'd said Tasmania is cold and wet. Most people on the mainland would definitely agree with me. A lot of people in Tasmania don't consider it cold and wet, but it is. Anyway, I looked up statistics. The rainfall we have here, 1,200 millimetres, is almost exactly the same as you have on Isla.
Yeah, right.
The humidity on average is 75% most days of the year, all year round, and it's almost exactly the same as you have on Isla. If you travel about 2 kilometres south of here, you hit the Southern Ocean, and the next stop's the Antarctic. And that's the same for a lot of places in Scotland. You go north from Scotland, and the next stop is the North Pole. So we have a lot of conditions which are really, really similar. Now, it probably means that we have to leave our whiskey in the barrel a lot longer. The extraction time is a lot longer. The oxidation and the changes that go on in the barrel are a lot slower because of the lower temperatures. And so it consequently leans itself towards a really environment that's suited to making older whiskies. And so even though we've released some, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds, we are waiting for the bulk of our whiskey to hit 10 years. We think about 10 years is going to be sort of the pivot point for our whiskey. And we're sort of aiming to ultimately produce product that's between 10 and 15 years old. As a distillery, we're only 10 years old, so we're only just creeping up to that mark. So it's been a long wait, but it's been a fun time though.
Yeah. I'm actually just going to share a photo that I've just picked up on your website for people who potentially haven't been down to your site there, but just to show the beauty of it. I mean, like looking at the trees and the vegetation there, that's quintessentially Australian, but that landscape could be from a few different places. It could be Scotland, particularly with the clouds overhead. But I mean, that's Mchenry Distillery is such a great example of the environment and the whiskey telling you when it's ready rather than you turning around and telling it. I mean, when you first started out, did you expect to be waiting 10 years until the bulk of your whiskey was ready?
Yeah, I think it's very noisy outside, Scott, so I think I caught what you said. But, it's funny actually, because when I started out, the idea for whiskey making came in a conversation 15 years ago. And 15 years ago, if you take yourself back, you had 3 or 4 distilleries, just a handful, Lark, Hellier's, Lime Burners, Bakery Hill, and Sullivan's, And so you didn't have this sort of, renaissance industry where, in a sense, most distillers now are rethinking whiskey. When I came into it, I thought, well, look, we have to make it effectively like the Scots make it. We have to be scions of the Scots. And so I'd already planned to make old whiskey, but it just seems like there was a nice confluence of, my thoughts and research and, the nature of the place that means that, in fact, it was a good call.
Yeah.
But you do see now, some younger whiskies, and they're fabulous, coming out all over Australia. And, the guys in South Australia are producing, really good whiskies at 3 and 4 years, hotter summers, different aging environments, which really just change up the whole whiskey making science, I suppose, the process.
Yeah. It's a very interesting sort of concept. I mean, I mean, we mentioned before, you do quite a bit with gin and your gin's very successful and very, very good. But how difficult has it been? Like, there must be so much hesitation to release. How hard is it to hold back?
Oh, look, it is. And we're lucky, okay? So, because we've had also the gin renaissance. And so, in a way, the gin has enabled us to invest in whiskey, keep the business running, and take the pressure off us taking product out of barrels early. We now only fill 300, 200, 300 litre barrels. So we're using large form barrels. And because of the surface to volume ratio, because of the conditions here, they just basically have to be aged for a long time. But thing is, Scott, I always came into the business with a business plan that effectively said we want to produce old traditional style whiskey. And so I think it's made it easier, because that's always been, what I've convinced the family we need to do, what I've convinced myself we need to do. And the other thing, I've got to give credit to my wife. Startup businesses, first for capital, I've had a wife that's worked out of the business, so it's taken a bit of pressure off us as well.
Yeah. I want to do a quick shout out to David and Caroline Taylor, who are watching in from the windy west coast of Tassie. And just for those joining us just now, there's a lot of wind. We actually saw a little bit of the beautiful Sunday sun on the side of the hill with Bill. Unfortunately, I had to move inside because the computer was getting blown off the stand there. And also to Sam Lipardi, who is spreading the good word for Mchenry on the mainland. Unfortunately, locked at home at the moment in Melbourne, but look forward to having a dram with him. So let's talk about this first release then. I mean, so we got a 100 litre ex-maker's mark cask finished in a 20 litre French oak at 44%. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's such a pleasure to be able to go back and try this, because I remember the oak barrel got 2 bottles, I think, and one of which we opened at a tasting in the room just opposite me here. But it has been, 4 years since I've tried this. Do you think, how does this whiskey sit for you? It's always going to be your first, but looking back on it now, what do you sort of think of it?
Oh, look, it's like your children, you always love them. Yeah. I've got 3 beautiful kids. I love them. And they're all different. And that's the same for whiskey. Each release we do, because we do single barrel releases at the moment, when you taste them, they're all a little bit different, but they all have some complexity about them that just makes them really enjoyable. When we started making whiskey, we deliberately filled 100 litre barrel, which allowed us essentially to bring out our sort of 5-year, 6-year-old releases at the same time as keeping stock for the 10, 15-year-old releases. We deliberately went for the Maker's Mark barrels because they're an American oak that's air dried. So in terms of the cooperage, the coopers can either air dry barrels. They take 2 to 3 years to get the wood to a moisture content suitable for making barrels, or you can kiln them, and that takes sort of 2 weeks. The advantage of air drying is that whilst it's sitting out in the microenvironment, it's collecting yeasts and spores and little bacteria, and they're slowly breaking down the wood, and they will release little flavours in addition to what the wood will release. So the Maker's Mark is something that we always strive to get. If we can get American oak, it's always Maker's Mark. And then the French oak was just to give it a bit more complexity, to give it more sort of layers of flavour in there than we'd get from just a straight American oak. Look, I love those early releases. They take me back to a time when I was a little bit less grey and, a bit more naive and was attempting all sorts of things maybe I shouldn't have. I really actually, I still love those early ones. They also remind me of the release we did, which was here in Hobart. We had surrounded by the industry, family, all my kids and my brothers and sisters flew in from all over Australia. So it's a little bit like whiskey. When you drink whiskey, it's like a bookmark in your life. The release of Barrel 1 was a real sort of milestone in our life. So I love it.
Yeah, actually, I think that's a really good way to put it. And I think one of the things that we're all missing, or I'm certainly missing from not having Whiskey Fair this year, is catching up with everyone and being in the same room. And I think that's a common thread. It's great that we've got 3 distilleries all make such different styles of whiskey here in the chat today. And I just love the delicacy of this. We have in Australia, we like big things. We are very successful in Scotch exports for big smoky whiskies and big sherry bombs, and our penchant for big fortified wine casks, particularly in those early Tassie days, is very well known. But I love how soft and inviting and gentle this whiskey is. Now, why don't I just throw it out to Peter and Brian there, who make very different styles of whiskey, and just sort of their opinions on the Mchenry spirit in the last sort of 5 years, knowing full well that Bill's still in the room, so you want to say nice things about him.
I'll jump in. I've got actually one of Bill's here that this is one that we just had in Test Whiskey Week last week, so I'm sipping on that now. Now, look, every one of the Bills that I've ever had, they've been lovely. Yeah, I'm sorry, Bill, I don't actually think I've got a bottle of yours here. I've got so many up there. Maybe there's one there somewhere. But no, whenever we do a tasting, I really enjoy them. Yeah, they are certainly, that Scottish sort of style. They've changed a little bit. Well, in fact, I think they've changed quite a bit since that very first release. I well remember that event.
I think that's an important point, and something I'd like to do more of is to actually exchange whiskies. So, we can not only be ambassadors for our own, but also be able to talk about other people's whiskies like we are now. And I think it's just great to have that little library of whiskies there that, people come to our distillery, they might want to try our stuff, but I'm sure they also would be, really keen to try a bit of, Blackgate and some Belgrove at the same time and just compare them.
Yeah.
So, Peter, I'll do an exchange with you, and Brian, I'll send some up to you, okay?
Okay, fantastic.
Yep. Thanks, Phil.
Brian, you've spent a bit of time in Tassie. It's a lovely place to spend a bit of time, but also you did a bit of, when you were starting up, a bit of, knowledge hunting and that sort of stuff down there, I think. Yeah,
I did. We went down early. We did the standard course with Bill Lark, the 2-day whiskey course, which gave you the opportunity to answer the question on the ATO sheet. Have you had any training? So we did that. And then after I got started, I went back and did another week down at Lark to fine tune my brewing. And I haven't sort of ever had the chance to try all the Tasmanian whiskies. We did visit a few distilleries last trip, but I remember Bill's being lovely and delicate, and really enjoyed that. And I think that's opportune because it's gaining more popularity now as the years go on. People are looking for more delicate sort of complex whiskies like Bill. So when his is 10 years old, it's going to be fantastic, and it'll be quite popular, I think, because that's the way that what people will be looking for then. Yeah.
It is a really interesting point, and we've spoken a couple of times this week about, I would consider all of you guys to be that sort of, in the modern era, that second generation of distillery, that sort of like 10 to 15. Peter, you're probably almost first generation in terms of the company, but there is so much choice now. It was only 5 years ago when we could only have about 4 different whiskies from anywhere in Australia on the shelf at Christmas time, and now I'm having to knock people back because there's physically not enough space. And we're talking about even Destination Cellars, that great bottle store down in Hobart that I think is celebrating 10 years or 15 years at the moment. They can't stock all the Tassie whiskies, let alone all the Tassie gins. So I mean, we are spoiled for choice a little bit. I mean, to Bill and Peter particularly, I mean, how have you guys seen that explosion of Tassie whiskies, and there's so many different flavour profiles now as well?
Yeah, they're all quite different. I've never had one there say, "Oh, that tastes like so and so's," and no, they're all very, very different, which is great. Keeps people trying and buying more. If we all taste the same, well, some would buy one bottle of whiskey and wouldn't buy another one till that one was finished. So that's fantastic that we're all that little bit different. Yeah, there is getting a little bit of problem with bottle shops, like destination sellers, just having enough shop space there, shelf space there to put everything. That's the little bit of a problem. But a lot of these, there's masses of little distilleries started up around Tassie, and I'm just hoping that they'll just service their own little local market, and they'll have their own fans from their own little region, and that's where they'll do well. But there's going to be a bit of problem once the market's just getting a bit crowded, not for volume by a long shot. The volumes, it's minuscule compared to the stuff that's imported, but it's just the choice on the shelf. But then then we got a lot of other avenues. Of course, we've got internet too to sell on there, and that's fantastic. If that wasn't for that, it should be a very crowded marketplace.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not complaining. I would have begged for this problem 5 years ago.
Look, I think Peter's right. It's creating a lot more competition. Whilst it put pressure on ourselves, I think it's a good news story, particularly for the customers, because it does place some pressure on pricing and competitiveness. And so what you saw in the early years, low volume, rare whiskies, very high price. So, they had to be, sort of special purchases. Now, the pricing stepping down, and they're becoming more and more accessible and price competitive with scotches. So I think, through that, it's a good news story for customers.
Yeah, 100%. Like it has been many years since I've tried this whiskey, and the longer it's in the glass, the more I'm loving it. It is just coming alive, and I think that's really special. If you're interested in trying this and you didn't grab a pack, I'm sorry, there's absolutely none left from 4 years ago. But one of the realities of doing these virtual tastings is, instead of having all the bottles on site and you come to us, we've sent them all out to you. We keep one or two back as what we call the emergency packs, because things go missing, things get run over by forklifts in warehouses and that sort of stuff. So we do actually have a couple of these packs that were on reserve in case anything went missing. Thankfully, nothing did. So there are a couple left. But I'm not going to finish that because I want to come back to it. But I definitely think that the perfect way to open this afternoon. And if it had been a whiskey fair day, as we sort of touched on, I would probably be needing a gentle whiskey to open up my Sunday as well, after the wild rover shenanigans that tend to happen after whiskey fair. But I might actually reach for a second whiskey now, and then look at the Belgrove Oats whiskey. So, I mean, for me, this whiskey, when this came out in 2000 and, I'm going to get exact details, 2014. It's only 67 bottles in the run at 58.4%. And obviously Belgrove and Peter Rye is what you do. It's what you do the most of. It's what you do best, in my opinion. But when this was released, for me, it really cemented that ethos of what Belgrove is, that yes, we distill a lot of rye because that's what we grow, but we can grow a lot of things, and just really that farm aspect to it. I mean, so what do you remember about the reaction to this whiskey when you first released it?
Yeah, well, going back before I released it, I was making rye whiskey, and that was at that stage, that's all I was planning to make. But rye is, anyone who knows anything about making rye whiskey or even rye beer, it's a dreadful thing to try and allow to remove the grain from it. And Oats has got a lot of husk on it, especially when it first comes off the harvester in the paddock. There's a lot of husk on it. And I thought, maybe I'll use, put a few oats in this mash to use the husk to try and make it louder. It's like a filter bed that gets on top, builds up on top of the louder screen. And I thought, maybe this will work. So I thought, damn it, I'll put a lot of oats in and just see what happens. So the batch was about 65, 70% oats. And then it's a little bit hard to say what percentage it is, because a lot of it is the actual weight of the husk, which is not contributing much. But then I thought, I'll chuck in a bit of wheat that I grew, a bit of oats, a bit of wheat, rye and barley as well. And just so we've actually got a 4-grain whiskey, which is what this is. It was really just an experiment to see if I could make these louders work a lot faster, just because we used to take us a day and a half to get them done instead of about 3 hours as the people doing malt whiskey would take. And anyway, so we ran it, and no, it didn't work. It didn't make it any faster. Just the type of husk, the shape of the husk just didn't make that almost like a gravelly filter bed like the barley husk does. And anyway, so we just ran it off, and And then I distilled it and just chucked it in a little 50-litre barrel, and that was the end of the experiment. And I thought, no, this doesn't work. Won't bother doing any more of that. And then, just when it became of age, a bit over 2 years old, I thought, oh, we'll see what this is like. And actually, I was pleasantly surprised. And I took it to a conference in America with me, a little sample of it, and had some great reviews from people over there. But like anything, you wonder sometimes whether people just say nice things because you're standing in front of them. But I have had some quite totally independent feedback that people do actually enjoy it. But it is quite different from the rye. Yeah. And then once that one came out, I thought, we might do some more of this because, so it was 2014, 16, probably about 2017. I thought, no, we better do some more of this. In fact, that year I had very little rye. As typically we seem to have some very, very bad seasons here lately, and I'd run out of rye, and I had a lot of oats in my silo that was meant to feed the sheep with. Yeah. And I thought, no, they can't have that. I'm going to turn that into whiskey. Started flagging a lot more oat whiskey, so a lot more oat whiskey coming along now. Yeah. But yeah, this was the original little trial. It was just a trial to see how the loudering would work. That's all it was going to be. But it set me off in another direction. It's, I technically am sort of sitting in front of you at the moment, even though it's virtually, but I'm not afraid to say that this is my favourite oat whiskey in the world. I haven't had too many, I'm going to admit, but because there aren't that many out there. But I've had a few from America, and I think one from Europe, and they can be messy and aggressive. And this is one thing that I don't think any of those other oat whiskies have managed to achieve. It's just how pretty it is. It's got that beautiful floral. There's something about your farm. I know your hopped malt whiskey, hops can be a real negative thing in distillation to my palate, but there's something about the way that you probably farm and you distill that, gets prettiness out of different things and not necessarily all the aggressive notes. But yeah, excellent. So, you've done a couple of oat releases. Is there any oats in barrel at the moment, or? Sorry, it's suddenly got windy outside. Any oat in barrels at the moment, did you say? Yeah. Oh, look, a lot. There's quite a few. Most of them are 200, 220 litre barrels. I don't know, a dozen of them around here, I reckon, somewhere. Yeah, excellent. A lot coming on the market. We've got batch 4 just came out very recently, and I personally, I think I like batch 4 just that little bit better than this batch 1. Yeah, whiskey moves slowly. It's a slow process. Like even if we have 30 years or getting closer to 40 years in the modern revival of Australian whiskey, it's still a slow process. But things feel like they're moving so quickly now, as we were sort of touching on before. When you look back to 2014, Peter, what's the biggest changes that you've seen in the past 6 years? I think that just recently price pressure, which is what Bill Mchenry mentioned a while ago. I think there's a downward pressure on price because the amount that's choice that's out there now. We're still just as collaborative, talking to each other, I think, as we ever were. And people leave, you're going for bigger barrels, I think. Probably, a lot of people when they first start out, they were going for little 20-litre barrels. And, so there's quite a lot of move into the hundreds, even past the hundreds into 2s and 3s. Yeah. Now, I think you have a bit too much hit and miss with the little barrels. There's some beauties out there, and most of them, they blend quite nicely when you back quite a few of them together. But, I think you're a bit more reliable in the bigger barrels. And I think that's what a lot of people are moving towards. And even even some are going to second fill barrels, which initially in this industry in Australia was, wouldn't say frowned on, but not, people didn't think that was going to work because you've exhausted the barrel, but you've exhausted the barrel from the flavour that was in it. But now by reusing them, you're getting more back to the wood and more back to what the spirit was that you put in there, not so much the port or the sherry or whatever that was in there. It's really speaking to the whiskey itself now, not what was in the barrel before. And I think people are suddenly realising, well, actually, these second, third fill barrels, or maybe not, nobody's doing third fill barrels except maybe me. But that's probably one of the bigger changes I've seen, I reckon, about reusing barrels. Yeah, I'm
might get this wrong, but I think it was about 2014 that was your first appearance at Whisky Fair, Peter. I think we spoke about this. We probably almost were a little bit early, and there was obviously a big Scotch dominance, and the new Australian players were coming through, and people didn't quite understand Australian rye. And I think distilleries like Archie Rose and Gospel in Melbourne are benefiting from what you've sort of built. So from a consumer's point of view, I've seen a big shift in that sort of stuff. And I'd be interested to see what Brian and Bill think of the Belgrove stuff, because I remember the first time I tried it, I was like, okay, this is a bit different. This is something I'm not used to.
I haven't actually tried the oat whiskey. I've tried a lot of Peter's Ryes. Love them. Real spicy, sort of, real spicy notes, going to, and of course, the lovely thing when you drink Peter's whiskey, it's the story that goes with it. There's always some sort of, invention or some sort of idea that, Peter's been experimenting with. So, it conjures up all sorts of things in your mind when you're trying some of the Belgrove spirits. But just to add to what Peter was saying, I think in terms of the things that are changing, certainly when I started, it was American oak, port, or French oak, port, sherry. And now, the amount of experimentation that's going on with barrels, in part because there is more distilleries, and so everyone's looking for a little angle or something different, but also there's more distilleries, so there's less conventional whiskey barrels. So now you're seeing, Pinots, Chardonnays, and Shiraz, and not just, second fill barrels, but in fact, virgin oak, and, all these sorts of things are going on, which I think is going to just, give the consumer so much, to choose from. The variety is just incredible what's going out there.
Yeah, 100%. Brian, do you remember your first Belgrove experience?
Not my first Belgrove. I remember tasting the oat whiskey for the first time, and I was just blown away by the abundance of flavour. I'd never drank and never tried an oat whiskey before, and really, really enjoyed it. But yeah, just the abundance of flavour was a knockout for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's another whiskey I haven't tried for 5 or 6 years, particularly the batch one. And just the florals that are coming off at that sort of violet and fresh garden nose underneath that sort of big orangey muscularness that you get with oat whiskey. It just is very, very gorgeous. And it's a very good point, Bill, that I think every bottle of Belgrove has a story attached to it. And there's always, some idea that's come at 1 a.m. or standing in front of a river or something. And Dave Taylor comments on the Facebook on one of the probably more out there Peter Bignell creations was the spit whiskey from the Rootstock event up in here, where the spittoons from the wine festival were distilled. And David asked just whatever happened to the spittoon whiskey. Is it still around or?
No, that all got sold out. It wasn't whiskey, it was brandy or eau de vie, because it was a wine base, of course. But that all sold out at the show the next year. Although we did it 2 years in a row, so I never heard what happened to the one we did the next year. I didn't. Yeah, just those who don't know, I didn't bring it down here to Belgrove to do it. It's all to do with sustainability and not tipping out 500 and 600 litres of wine after each show of spittoons and dregs at the end of the day, and people tipping their glasses. But yeah, we used it all. We distilled it, and then I actually went off to France and did the same thing again over there in Paris event. Yeah. So I'll just go and grab you a little bottle while you talk amongst yourself just for a moment.
Yeah. I do actually. I was just looking over there. It was called Kissing Strangers, which was the 1-year-old brandy release. Well, not by brandy being the age, but there was a bottle somewhere here, but I just can't quite see it. That I was going to show, but I thought that was an excellent name for it, Kissing Strangers. Yeah, that's the one. Or Kissing a Stranger.
Yep. Yeah. So that's an eau de vie. We did one aged I think it was in a sherry barrel for a few months, but actually the eau de vie was way better. And that's the one I did when I went off to Paris and did it over there.
Yeah.
French Kissing a Stranger.
And that's something when we are able to go and cross borders and meet up with everyone, that's something, if you ever are having, FaceTime with Peter, having dinner or something, be careful what you leave around, because he will distill it, So if those things are valuable to you, make sure you hold on, because he will grab it and distill it, doesn't matter what it is. But look, excellent. The latest release from Peter, obviously you can't buy this outside of the couple of emergency packs we saved back. But the peated rye has just landed on our shelves. And that's an interesting one because the peated rye, that's not something that's done, anywhere else in the world really. And I remember the early releases, we sent a lot back to American tourists who were looking for something to take back home with them. I remember the first releases went a lot that way. So without any tourists, it's going to be interesting. There's actually some for Australians to drink this time. Yeah. We might move on then to the third whiskey I want to talk about tonight, to the Blackgate's 520s whiskey release. And I have some very fond memories of the early barrels of Blackgate. I think barrel 4 and 5 were whiskey, and then there was 11 or 12 or something like this. But they're like very, very small production. They were sold basically through the markets out west and locally, and then through a couple of stores in town. But 520s for me was the first release that sort of put you on the agenda or the psyche of the Australian, the national whiskey drinker. That was, it might have been the fact that it was 67% that people started to take up and notice. But do you remember the release of 520s, Brian?
Yeah, I sure do. Yeah, that's when we first started. The 20-litre casks were popular, especially in Tasmania. Everywhere you go, people had racks and racks of 20-litre casks. And originally it was the belief that they matured quicker. So I bought 7. So originally there were 7, but 1 got stolen in the post. So it was down to 6. And then, we sold 1 to the Oak Barrel for an exclusive release. And then so we had the 5. So we just married those together and then just bottled it at cask strength as it came out. Then since then, after that, we did a second fill in the same casks. And we kept all of those, so that was the 620s. And then we've since then done a third fill, and we've sold one of those. Gareth in Sydney bought one of those and did that ambassador release. And so it's back to the 520s 2.0, but interesting twist. So it's the third fill, 20-litre third fills, but peated this time as well. So that release is imminent as well.
Yeah, right. So just before we went live, I think and is Janice there?
Yeah, she's here.
Yeah, I know she's not huge on the screen, but I want to say g'day to Janice, because as we know, there's always a more important woman behind a lot of these distillery setups. There she is. G'day, Janice.
Hi.
That's where things really get done is with the Janice side of the business. I think Brian would agree. Yeah. But the single cask that the Oak Barrel bought, it was 17, I think 2017.
16.
Yeah, 16. There you go. Was cask number 16. So, were all of these whiskies around that sort of period, like that very, very early release things? Yeah.
They the 520s were all filled basically at the same time. And I think they're only 2-year-old when we released it the first time.
Yeah, well, I do have the details here. Yeah, 2 years old, only 159 bottles in this release. Now, remembering back what we were talking about, that beautiful view from Port Arthur, that takes whiskies, very patient with its whiskies. Mendooran out in the mighty central west of New South Wales is not so patient with its whiskies. Hot days, cold nights, that's pretty typical of where you are.
Yeah, I was thinking when Bill was talking about that, we're probably polar opposite to Mchenry set up there with the temperatures and the climate. So yeah, we get stinking hot over the summer, up to mid 40s. And then in the winter, we'll get down to the negatives. We get some heavy frosts. So that range of temperatures gives us quite an aggressive maturation. We get a lot of extraction from the casks. And so you can see the colour of that after 2 years. It's a different ball game. So, that allows us to, and when Peter was talking about second fills, we've got a third fill peated that's really magnificent. That's going to be released later in the year as well. But yeah, we're doing a bit of that, but it's just that climate and the aggressive maturation is going to allow us to do a lot of second and third fills.
Yeah, Brian, with you talking about those temperature fluctuations, what's your daily fluctuation? You said your mid 40s. What would you typically get down to at night on the same evening?
Probably still in the 20s, I think.
Yeah. No, we'll get. We'll hit 40 here just on the odd days, couple of days in the summer. But then it'll go down to sort of 15 at night, or even 10. on some days, we get a cold front comes through. But we'll have the fluctuating day. I've got some graphs of it. We'll get 20 degrees between daytime and nighttime temperatures here for a lot of the, from the springtime right through the summer into the autumn. So it's pretty aggressive here as well, and very, very different from what Bill's got down there at Port Arthur.
Yeah, Bill, what would be the typical for you?
Oh, look, because we're sort of close to the coast, so consequently, the fluctuations between day and night and summer and winter aren't big. So summertime, hot day would be 25, and on the same day, we'd probably get down to 12. In the winter, a hot day would be 15, and it would get down to 5 at night. So certainly a smaller band, between day and night, and certainly not we don't get the really big hot days here.
You really have dragged a little bit of Scotland, haven't you?
Yeah. And look, you know what? You go to the coastline here. If anyone's ever been to Scotland, you have a look at the coast in Tasmania, and you think, crikey, if it wasn't for the eucalypts, you would be in Scotland. It's just remarkably similar. Even the ground, the granite and the dolerite that makes up the ground here, just looks so much like Scotland. Devil's Marbles and Ireland and things like that. It's just incredible, the similarity.
Yeah. I think anyone who's drinking along with us on this set, and Raf in the Zoom chat points out that sounds a little bit warmer than Isla, but not by much, which I think is very true. This is a very big whiskey. We're closer to 70% than we are. And I remember Cask 16 that we actually gave a sample to a few people before the fair back 4 years ago. And one of my favourite tasting notes was from a gentleman called Nav Singh, who does the Domaine Simar wines we do a lot with from Tassie, does the Sud Pellet gins, everything, Tassie bitters, everything he touches as far as I'm concerned turns to gold. And he described Cask 16 as dragon's fire breath. And I sort of did, because when you try the 520s, you know about it and it's going to stay there for a little while. And that's very much, across the range of the Blackgates whiskies. And not only are we trying some of the first casks ever filled, but also a window into the past, because this is unpeated and you've been only distilling peated stock for a little while now, Brian, I think?
Yeah, 3 or 4 years. And we've just transitioned back into unpeated.
Okay.
Just this year. So I've got 3, 4, maybe 5 years worth of peated in the works. So we've got plenty of that for a while. And I'm back on the unpeated now. Yeah.
And I've actually been lucky enough to try a little bit of the Ambassador release, which is the third fill of one of the 20 litres, but heavily peated. And it's excellent. It's banging. And I think I tried it with a couple of people who know you quite well, Brian, and sort of this is the most Brian Blackgate they've seen from the distillery. So that's interesting. But, what that does mean is for the next few years, we'll be seeing exclusively peated releases pretty much.
Yeah, we've got a big sort of original Blackgate release soon. It's an Apera cask matting. So it's a big release. We did 630 bottles and that's pending. That'll be out probably next week. And that's the penultimate unpeated. After that, we've got a single cask that I kept aside that was really, really good out of the 4. And then, that's the end of unpeated for quite a few years.
Yeah. When you look back on a release like 520, so how does that sit in your mind in the canon of Blackgate and in what you've done so far? I'm excited about it because it was so popular. That was really good. I love that. I always struggle with the ABV when we do our releases. For some reason, I'll be tasting a lot and my palate sort of goes a bit numb, and then I always tend to release them a bit hotter than what I should, and that's sort of how I feel about the 520s. But I guess it's worked. It was really popular. So I learned I was tasting them the wrong way. So I'd get a heap of strengths together, and I'd start at the strong one and work down, and it doesn't work like that. You've got to start with the weakest one and work up. So that was the mistake I made. Yeah. I mean,
that's interesting about your ABV. You release that, Brian. That I push myself sometimes. I find that the strength that I like, and then go down one more ABV lower than that, because I think I'm a bit too used to drinking these cask strengths, and my palate's a bit damaged. And I think I've got to really think about the customers here, not just me. Yeah, so generally, not always, but generally, yeah, drop it down one more AB from what I think's the sweet spot. And then you come back a few weeks later and have another taste, and I usually realise, yeah, that is right.
Yeah, that's a good idea. The other part of it is the compromise. It's a constant battle, but just to maintain that big flavour. And so every bit you go down, you're losing flavour. So it's an internal battle there to keep the flavour, but not have it too hot.
Yeah. I love that. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I find sometimes as you're bringing the ABV down, it'll pick up again in balance. So you drop down the weird spot there where I think Tim Ducker talks about the switches in either side. It's not as good. But so it's just dilution. Dilution isn't just reducing the flavour or sometimes you just hit that balance. The water's brought everything into balance for some reason. I don't know. It's very complex science if you ever knew what it was.
No, for sure. That's why we taste it at all different strengths. It does sing at a certain strength. That's what we find. It's better and changes as you go. Yeah.
I mean, there's two schools of thoughts here. I love, the cask strength because that gives, as a drinker, the opportunity to add water. But I also love, the approach of, that particular whiskey company, for example, that tend to release about 47 to 50 because they'll say this is the perfect level for each dram. And I think Bill at that 44%, that is perfect for Mchenry. How much research did you do into or each release in terms of the ABV?
Look, to be honest, the research is all about the whiskey. So we will just get a tasting panel together of different dilutions and just look at that individual whiskey on basically its merits. Maybe a little bit different from Peter. I don't like really, really strong alcoholic drinks. And so I just have a preference to go towards more that bottle, strength rather than the cask strength. And Brian's absolutely right. You got to be so careful with the dilutions because you start, you can really pick it, your ABV. So it's a bit of a tough challenge. We move, every single release is a little bit different. It's like I said earlier, they're like children. They're all different and they've all got to be treated slightly differently. And we, basically review them on their merit. We've done some releases just recently at 49.8, and I'm actually starting to like them. So becoming a bit of a convert to cask strength. So, but I think, look, every distillery has its own sort of philosophy and in terms of what they want to express to the marketplace. And so you'll always get this huge array of opinion, I think, about, what's best. But certainly for us, we tried to get between 44 and 46 for our bottle strength whiskies.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you there, Bill. Yeah.
One of the things that I'm loving about this chat is we've got three completely different whiskies from three different distilleries, but they are extensions of the people that make them. So, when Peter talks about Belgrove, you can see it and go, yeah, okay, that's where that's coming from. When Bill, the way that you talk about, whiskey and your habits and what you like to drink, I can 100% see that. And so I think that's a really important thing. When you open a bottle of Mchenry or Belgrove or Blackgate, I know for me, I picture myself, okay, sitting next to Brian and drinking this. And obviously we know Brian's a very pretty, delicate human being, but his whiskies are a little bit more robust than that. But going back to the 520s, this is sort of like a window back into that Blackgate DNA. It's big, it's oily, it's treacle, it's golden syrup, and even in the peated releases, that's carried through. So Brian, a quick shout out to Garth, who's having an ambassador release right now. He's very excited about the peated 520s, saying that they're going to be magic. What are you excited about bringing to whiskey drinkers in Australia of what you've got laid down at the moment?
The peated, a lot of the peated whiskey we've done is in second fills, and then we also went to large format. So I've done a lot of bourbon cask maturation as well, and I'm most excited about the bourbon cask because it touches on what Peter was saying earlier about the second fills and bigger casks imparting less flavour. less cask flavour and lets the spirit talk more. And I'm pretty excited about that. So we've got a lot of pretty decent peated whiskey coming out in the future. So yeah. And then, like I said, I've got some second and third fill 100 litre format fortifieds, which come along really well as well. So the peated side of things, I think popularity of that's growing, and hopefully I've done that at the right time. And larger casks, and the bourbon is that's what we're excited about.
Yeah, awesome. I think Raf just in the Zoom chat here says, I think that's what craft means. I think referring to that conversation of the whiskies being the extensions of oneself. And Sam, who works with Mchenry based down in Melbourne, says his cask strength conversion of Bill has begun. And I think Sam, continue that push a little bit. I think that happens with every whiskey drinker. I think I remember when I was first getting into this in a serious way, I built up to it, and then I only looked at cask strength whiskies for a few years, and then I'm sort of gone back the other way and adding a lot more water. And but I think that happens just naturally, and tastes change and tastes evolve, and I think that's a huge part of enjoying whiskey. So on that sort of note, I'm be interested to hear from you three about what, outside of your own releases, what new exciting things are in terms of Australian whiskey are you enjoying at the moment, or are you looking forward to? Might be new distilleries or new styles, or might throw Brian in the deep end for that one to kick off.
The latest exciting thing was Lee and Bree at Backwoods. Their whiskey is really, really exciting. We had a bit of a informal gathering over here, and they brought both their malt and their rye over, and they were really, really impressive. I was excited about that. So they've since released that, and the uptake's been incredible. That's been really popular. Other than that, I don't really get to try much other whiskey because we're just so isolated out here. But yeah, all new stuff coming on. I'm keen to try more and more. Do some more research.
It's almost like we need to hold a whiskey fair each year and bring everyone together so you can try them, Brian.
Yeah, exactly. That's the chance I get to taste whiskey. Whiskey fair. That's it.
Bill, anything caught your eye recently?
Yeah, look, I think the fact that you're seeing more and more peated whiskies coming about. For a long, long time, there was very little choice Australian-made peated whiskey, and the fact that Brian's got them, we're working on them, Peter's got them, and there's probably a bunch of others there I mentioned. You can really, if you like those peated whiskies, there's a range to choose from. It's fabulous.
Yeah. And Peter, I know your eye is restless at the best of times. What have you been looking at recently?
Yeah, it just happens to be on my desk where I'm doing my book work at night, and I get a bit sick of that, and I have a sip, and it's an old Overeem bottle I got there from ages ago. I just keep going back to that, and that's delicious. And I must get hold of Overeem American Oak one now, the bourbon cask, because I remember tasting one of those in Casey's Bond store years ago and think, wow, this is different. That's before he even released it. And I haven't actually managed to get hold of one of those yet. Not that I've tried very hard. I haven't stumbled across one, I should say. I'll have to have a go at that. But I just consistently, probably Overeems, I reckon. But I just enjoy everything. There are a few that I don't enjoy. Very, very, very few that I don't enjoy. But even those, in some ways, I enjoy having tasted them because I know what a whiskey is I don't like. And, it's all about education. Yeah, I think the Overeem is probably one of those ones that I keep going back to.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. There are very, very few whiskies in the world that are bad. Even what I would consider to be whiskey that's not as good as some other whiskey is still very, very good. And I think that's people. I think looking from the outside of this industry, they see someone like Phil Lark, who doesn't have a bad word to say about anyone. It's like, how can anyone ever be that happy? I was like, well, get in the Australian whiskey industry. That's how you become that happy. That's the way it is. But we're sort of at the hour mark of tonight. And so I do want to thank you guys on that note, because you all make me very, very happy, even when you don't know it sometimes. And you guys do all the hard work, and I get to just drink it all and take all the credit standing in front of the shelves here. So, for everything from these releases to, which I think each one of them shifted the landscape a little bit upon their release, and they've almost got louder and louder, and their impact's being felt more as the years have gone on. So everything you've done from these releases prior to post, thank you very much. And I think Brian with Blackgate, it's such a small operation, but I love that Blackgate lives within its means. It's each whiskey is very, very special. Peter, with your experimentation, long may it continue. And Bill, when you get to that sort of 10-year core range, I know we've been speaking about it for a few years now, whatever that looks like, I don't think there's many Australian whiskey releases that I'm anticipating more than that is, whatever that looks like in the future. So congratulations on so far, and well done, I guess.
Thanks, Scott.
Can I say, Scott?
Oh, thank you very much.
Look, thanks. Big thanks for hosting this, inviting us on. A big thanks. We can't see them, but all the customers, all the Australian, whiskey drinkers are out there watching, listening. Without you, we wouldn't have businesses. So I think it's it's a big thank you from us to you too.
Yeah, 100%. I'd have to go get a real job if the lovely whiskey drinkers of Australia stop drinking. But yeah, a big shout out to Mike Martin, who's really enjoyed the three of your time, and to Raf in the Zoom chat as well.
Yeah, thanks very much, Scotty, for running these shows. I've been on a few with you and watched quite a few of them. And I remember went on a whiskey round table quite a few months ago, and we got talking about when we're going to have the Oak Barrel Whiskey Fair. And I was a little bit pessimistic. I said, I got my doubts whether she's all going to be right by then. I've got quite a science background, and I probably understand these things a little bit better than other people, but I couldn't see it back then, and I'm afraid I was right.
Yeah.
But anyway, you've fixed things. We've got them all on Zoom. Probably got a lot of people in here who wouldn't have been able to make it to the Whiskey Fair. So that's one good thing about it anyway.
Yeah, 100%. And I remember that chat, Peter, and I think we were all sort of knew it wasn't going to happen this year, but we were determined to market in some way. I didn't know what that looked like. And I think thanks to the efforts of you guys for donating your time, we've created that little bit of, Whiskey Fair is about drinking excellent whiskies, and we're doing that today. But also just the conversations and the natural catching up, once every 12 months type thing. So, again, thank you guys for donating your time and your efforts, and particularly for the two Tasmanians here braving the windstorm that's lashing you guys at the moment and finding shelter somewhere to come and join us. But yeah, look, I'm going to turn off the Facebook stream. This will all be viewable, so this is now part of the Whisky Forum archive. You can go back and watch this whenever, and if you are lucky enough to get one of the sets, you've got 30 mils, so there's probably a little bit left you can save for later tonight or tomorrow and watch back. But thank you for everyone watching, and again, I want to hammer in thank you to the three of distillers that make excellent whiskey, and we look forward to sharing a dram in the flesh soon. So appreciate it.
Thanks, Scotty. You're welcome.
See ya.